We're still on day one of the Non-Allied Movement Summit that is happening at the Speak Resort in Munyonyo, and of course two other sideline events, that is the East African Business Forum at the Kampala Serena Hotel and the Women in Agro-Business at the Serena Chigo. Both of these are looking at the economic impact and how best we can make good of this summit. Now, joining me on set, I have two guests. That is Timothy Sebathi, who happens to be an editor with us at Uganda Broadcasting Corporation. Most welcome, Timothy.
It's a pleasure to be with you here.
And then I have Dr. Peter Chibuka, who is a lecturer at Ngomba University and a specialist on environmental governance issues. You're most welcome, Doctor.
It's my pleasure.
I'll begin with Doctor. One of the issues that are expected to be addressed in this summit are issues of climate change. Now, recently we had the COP, and see it was all about environment. Why in this day and age are we seeing environmental matters topping agendas of various international forums?
Thank you very much. Earlier on, you talked about issues of economic issues for women and for the youth. There is nothing that you can talk about economic that has no basis from the environment. The environment is the resource base of, if you think about food, where does it come from? If you think about health, you think about water, all comes from the environment. So Uganda is an agroeconomy, meaning that much of the economy of Uganda depends on agriculture. Climate fundamentally is the one which governs everything. You talk of food, you talk of water, you talk of health, you talk of industry, because we want to industrialize. Climate forms the basis of everything. So when we talk of, we cannot talk of economic progress without integrating environmental issues. Come to the point of, even now as we talk, I think there is a policy where in the budgeting systems, we must incorporate budgets for climatic change. Anything we do must have an integral component of climate. Climate, of course, we are now focusing on climate because climate is the ultimate consequence of degradation of the environment. So it becomes an issue. And our economic progress, our economic success, we cannot have any meaningful success economically. Look at the agriculture. We have had crop failures, either because of long droughts. We have had crop failures either because of the El Nino effect, unprecedented severe rains coming at a time when we don't expect them and lasting longer when it is supposed to be the season for harvesting. This is January. We are still experiencing rain. Now, what will happen to the crops? They will wilt, and we shall have a food shortage, food failure. Now, what does that mean? Just that alone, it can create a lot of unprecedented catastrophes. One, apart from food shortages, you can have less value from exports. You'll have bridges collapsing, roads becoming not easily accessible. And that means I think it is very, very important that we consider, we discuss this program. Non-aligned countries, the majority of them are either newly developed countries and others are developing. So as we look forward to economic progress, we cannot leave out climatic change. How do we adapt? How do we develop climatic resilience and mitigate as well?
Now, Doctor, that having been said, how will then these resolutions be implemented? Because you've seen a number of international forums where we've had declarations, we've had resolutions regarding climate change. Recently was the COP. But you find that certain issues, because these are not coercive bodies, when they commit themselves to the damage and
implementation highly depends on how are you committed, the commitments you are making in your policy, commitments you are making in climatic financing. Financing is very, very critical. So once the resolutions, that is a starting point, once the resolutions are made, the resolutions into actionable programs. It can be the public sector, it can be the corporate world, which we call the private sector, and how do we bring on board the development partners? The major thing about climatic change is now focused on to publicize and influence society. You've heard where charcoal has been burned, okay? And trees absorb a lot of carbon. So one way, how do we have our citizenry focus on alternative, renewable, and energy alternatives which can reduce emissions. Emissions are highly responsible for climatic change. So we can do that. It is possible. It is possible if there is government deliberate commitment towards that. And I'm glad that every sector is now required to have a budget aligned towards climatic change, climatic adaptation, climatic resilience. And then we have the people who are technical and they can come in and contribute, be it
now,
in agriculture.
Just to cut you, this is where I want to bring in Timothy. Timothy, we are having, today is the senior officials that are meeting, and of course they'll have the declaration and all that to fit into the minister, then the ministers then shall have the heads of states and government. But when we look at the non-allied movement, initially it had reasons focusing on the political tensions that were there. after the Second World War, then we had the Cold War. And these countries felt we don't need to align ourselves to any country. But we need to push to ensure that us who are just developing, we maintain our independence. Looking at today, where maybe those core issues are no longer that strong, the impact of these declarations that come out of such, to be much now, it is numb. How do we domesticate? How do we enforce them?
Non-aligned movement, they need to do a lot of reforms. One, in the way they run that organization. The organization does not have a secretariat.
It's non-structured.
It's non-structured. Does not have a secretariat. That organization survive on host member states. That a country that hosts the non-aligned movement summit becomes the secretariat of that country over the next 3 years. Now, that secretariat is not funded by member states, because for them, their membership is just, it's not pegged on money. So, the secretariat does not have the funds to run it. So, if whatever is going to be presented in Munyonyo, if is to have a meaning from the several declarations and resolutions they have made, which are on the shelves, they need, one, to identify a budget of whatever my colleague is raising to do with the climate change. But otherwise, if they don't do that, I hope that the Kampala summit is going to look at, one, reforms, two, identifying funding, sources of funding to many of the good ideas that they're going to raise. But if they are going to sit around, have long speeches, pass declarations and resolutions, it will be like the Baku previous summit, whose resolutions were passed but they have not been implemented. And again, they're just coming back to look at them, and again they make the Kampala resolution. So, moving forward, as they sit in Kampala, they should look at those issues. Once they just present academic documents and the implementation falls on its weight, then it would be looked at like other organizations that back but they do not bite. Actually, critics of the non-aligned movement have advanced an argument that even the name non-aligned movement, it is scaring. What are you aligning against? At its inception, between 1955 to 1961, it was purely political, fighting for independence, against imperialism. At the end of the First World War, the issue of colonialism and independence was sorted. Now, there came a new wave of neocolonialism, which they are grappling with now. And there's no way they can move out of it, because most of the global south countries are heavily hippie countries, heavily indebted poor countries that survive on handouts from the global north. So, save for the two Asian tigers, China and India, but the others, and China and India have a bigger role to play if whatever is going to be discussed, if they are going to live to see them being implemented, China and India must be in a position to do real adequate financing of some of these issues that they are going to discuss. So I'm seeing the Kampala NAM and G77 summit, let me limit myself to NAM.
Yes,
If the NAM Kampala summit does not focus itself on structural reforms, discussing having a well-funded secretariat, I'm seeing again the good academic documentation that they're going to present about climatic change and so on, remaining on the shelves like many of the academic documents that they have submitted in Australia in 2016, in Baku, and many others that were first submitted in Bandak. So we must be very careful. The Kampala summit must be a game changer.
Now, talking about the Kampala summit being a game changer, of course, we are able to know of some of the issues that are likely to surface. Climate change, that is one of them. Then we have the high debt, even in the official opening of the senior officials meeting, General Minister of Foreign Affairs, General J.J. Odon, came out and clearly talked about the issue of how they are highly indebted. So with these then being discussed, you rightly talked about lack of a secretariat, lack of funds, but where can we get a breakthrough? Because these may not be things that may even be worked on as sooner. Because when you look at now, there's the issue of Palestine coming on board there. So there's so much to be handled, yet you're looking at it like there's an encumbrance.
One, they need to rethink. You know, Africa and Asia, they're the biggest material, they are the biggest markets for raw materials to the global north. So they need to rethink on how they can manage that hemorrhage of just churning out raw materials to those other countries, to the global north, and Asia and Africa remaining at the mercy of the global north. So once they master the game of value addition in their raw materials, and now they start attracting the global north to come to the global south. But so long as they're still putting all their raw materials to the global north, there is a problem. Even within, among themselves, they're being held captive by two Asian tigers, China and India. Because now, when you look in West Africa, China controls the biggest iron ore belt. All the iron ore that goes to, that runs factories in China comes from West Africa. China has tapped into mineral businesses in Eastern Congo, and even here, and many other countries of East Africa. So all those countries now they run to Beijing because they look now at Beijing as their godfather. So India, the same thing is trying to re-strategize itself, more especially it's developing now a high technological sector. So I'm looking at a situation that these heavily indebted poor countries in the global south that have a lot of minerals, have a lot of resources, they should start thinking around value addition, so that to avoid the donation of their minerals and they turn out being beggars to the global north, that will help them, one, not to lose their economic independence, which I do think that many of them have already lost their economic independence to either China or India or many countries in the global north. Because once they start running to those countries seeking for loans, that means you are staking some of your resources as collateral securities. So that means you are going to live in a deeper malaise of poverty, because whatever you go to ask for, you need to stake something as security. And now, servicing of the debt burden becomes recurring, generations after generations, servicing the debt burden.
Now here I want to
those
bring
are some
in
of
a
the
doctor, because you seemed so hopeful and optimistic that with such a summit in Kampala, issues of climate change are really going to be handled and really will have serious implementation. Now, Doctor, how best do you think issues of climate change can be tackled on a global perspective?
Non-aligned movement, I think it's a formidable force. Putting together all those countries and where China is and India, they are big economies. So when something collectively comes from such a bigger movement, we have more bargaining power. As you are saying, why don't we be hopeful and optimistic? Because when we, however small our economies are, the majority of the NAM countries, but collectively, if we can create a fund, like he has suggested, I think we can move further mileage in correcting some of the issues we want to address, climatic change being one of them. Our economies heavily depend on agriculture. Agriculture is the major employer. Agriculture is the, like Uganda, we are self-sustaining in food. So that is something we cannot lose. Even when we have other raw materials, minerals, we are about to have oil gotten out of our ground. But you'll notice that even such extraction industries, once they have that component of environment, and when we are talking, negotiating with Total, with Sinok, with what, we can negotiate better. Now, that one, they already resolutions made on it. But I think globally, we've had recently the COP28, and of course also there, they made resolutions and translating them into country chapters has not been done yet.
The war that was there, if I want to use the word diplomatic war between the OPEC countries, oil producing countries, and then the other ones that were thinking we have to phase out fossil fuels, still left COP, even the target of to what emissions we should have by 2030. All these still seem, Doctor, that it is let's meet, let's talk, he who feels can go with what you've decided.
I'm not somebody who is so orthodox in the environment. But I believe, because that one, it is called ecological egalitarianism, to be so much conservative about the environment. Environment, yes, we need it. We need to pursue economic progress alongside safeguarding the environment for the present and the future generation. I am arguing that the environment needs to be maintained. But when you are talking of conserving the environment and you want also to conserve poverty, no, we need to have a meeting point. You cannot completely say, do away with oil extraction so that you safeguard the environment. We will conserve poverty. So these two must go along each other. How do we position ourselves that we develop economically, but without compromising the state of our environment? Okay? I believe the technologies, we can develop technologies that ensure that, like the oil pipeline, is environmentally sound, so that we have economic progress, we have resources also extracted with sustainable applications.
Well, you can see footage that was earlier when we had, of course, that is the opening of the senior officials meeting at the Speak Resort Munyonyo, where as of now they're in a break, and the various committees are meeting. That is the Social and Economic Committee, and of course the political committees, where they'll later come up with, of course, final drafts there, and they will be discussed. And of course this will fit in later tomorrow, the ministers and then the heads of government. We are still looking at elements of climate change in the non-allied movement summit that is happening. One of the issues that is going to be addressed or discussed, but also we want to see to what extent, what impact is this movement as far as addressing some of the issues that they have continuously pointed at. This time they have climate change, they have the high debt. These are some of the issues that are expected to be addressed. Then also the issue of Palestine, and of course what is happening there with Israel, where we expect this very summit to come up with a declaration of how best they should move forward, where they are standing. And have Timothy Sibathi, one who is saying, well, we need really to look at certain things with more clear eyes. And of course I have Doctor there who is very optimistic that when it comes to issues of climate change, 120 countries plus observer countries that are part of this NAM, really there's so much that we can achieve, because united we can make things moving. However, don't forget that NAM is not a coercive. Much as countries are member states there, they retain their independence. They retain their sovereignty in terms of decision making and adopting to what they feel. Now, I'll bring in Timothy. Timothy, this is a body that has been around for some time, 1961. This is the 19th summit that is going to be happening, that is kicked off in Uganda. But one of the clear things here is NAM looks at, if there conflict, it has to be peaceful resolution. We resolve them peacefully. We are not like maybe the UN that could have standing armies, that could send in arms and all this, create peace, then go for missions. Now, with the nature of NAM and the challenges in terms of various conflicts within member states of NAM, of what impact is NAM to creating solutions?
Their documents are always optional. They only propose that for us we think this would be the right way, and it ends there. They went, the war between Russia and Ukraine, a delegation from Africa went and met the man in Kyiv, and they went and met the man in St. Petersburg in Moscow. They listened to them, they came back to Africa, and the war went on. As we talk, people are dying. The war in the Gaza between Israel and Palestine is going on for the last 2 months, or three or so. The number of deaths have gone as far as 20,000, over 20,000 people, and they are still dying as we talk this morning. We are in Kampala trying to discuss. And mark you that these countries that are fighting, they are not members of the non-aligned movement. They are just observers. They are also going to come, sit as observers, listen to the Third World Organization. Whatever they're going to send, they get on their planes and they go back. I don't think that Israel will present a document. No, it's just coming as an observer. Likewise, Russia. Likewise, Ukraine is an observer. I've read the document. So do not expect much, because I do believe those who are going to sort out those, more especially the Gaza war, it will be the United States and other 3 or 4 powerful countries. The non-aligned will just present a proposal to them, whatever they think, and will stop there. So don't expect much.
Now, still this brings me to the initial principles of its founding. One of them we've said, okay, colonialism was fought, but currently we have a change of neo-colonialism.
That one, they cannot run away from it.
Where we have a number of these countries highly indebted, but even where we look at independence, for example, Uganda as a sovereign state came out and passed the anti-homosexual law. And here we see sanctions, and we have a body as a non-allied movement.
Of course, they know, they are well aware that they cannot do much. I still remember His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni towards signing that bill into law. He told members of parliament from the NRM caucus that I'm going to sign this law, but I want to tell you that we must be ready for the repercussions. We shall reach a time even when salaries will be reduced. We must face the music. And here we are when we see threats, the budget, the donor funding, the donor basket reducing. Those are some of the repercussions that we need to stand for, we need to bear with. As in how long they are going to take, God knows. Whether they are behind the door negotiations between the government and those those development partners who are putting conditions, we don't know. But that's what explains being in the global south. But the other thing is also, when you go to countries in the United Arab Emirates, for them their position is defined. Why is it that these development partners do not threaten those people?
How many highly indebted?
Why us?
The financial and economic muscle matters.
So those are some of the double standards that we shall continue to face in the global south, more especially heavily indebted poor countries who still run to the global north looking for loans to manage our own affairs. They know that those guys in Africa, some of them cannot stand their own.
But now, Timothy, a quick one before I go to Doctor. You know, when you look at the non-allied movement, it's a big bloc, a big movement. It may be even the second largest to say. And there must be power in numbers. Now, when they conglomerate and have a position, don't you think it gives them a better bargaining force on various global platforms?
The non-aligned movement, or countries in the global south, have 60% of the world population.
Yes.
But only contribute 30% to the world economic growth. So it speaks volume. And the 30% of the world economic growth, that comes from China and India. So for us, I think we should be in the far global south, should be either contributing like 1%, or like about 10%, or 5%. So you can see the dilemma that we are in. That even now, as we are being bugged by the global north, we are running to the two Asian tigers, China and India. That's why we normally run to get money now with the Exim Bank coming on board. But the global north has warned, saying that is China's investment in Africa sustainable? That is food for thought, because they have been in the jungles of the global south before, prior to the wave for independence, struggle for independence. They know how much they invested in Africa and in Asia, but there came time when their investments were not sustainable, and they were eating up the taxpayer in Europe, until when they say we can no longer run the cost of administration in these countries, let's give them their own independence, and they went back. So that's why the World Bank and the IMF are also questioning. Because as we talk now, Africa is heavily indebted, Africa alone without Asia, Africa is heavily indebted to China to a tune of $650 billion. And you have seen some countries in the Rhodesia, the southern Rhodesia, some countries China has attached their coastal lines. China has attached some of their banks. So here it almost wanted to happen, but President Museveni said no. They had put a condition that on something to do with the standard gauge railway, that if you cannot dance to our tunes, allow us to be stakeholders also in the standard gauge railway, so that we can run it concurrent, both of us. Museveni said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We're going to pay, and now you want also to be a partner in this. Let us first put it on hold and go on the drawing board. And that's where we're headed. Not Uganda alone, but many other countries that moving forward, we must check on our appetite for loans.
Well,
I think,
yes, Doctor, I wanted to interject.
Before I want to interject, all is not lost. I think at the time when a non-aligned movement was formed, China was not a powerful economy as it is, nor India. Let me say even Uganda. We've been making progress. I would draw the example of countries which recently had coups in West Africa. Niger, one of them, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea-Bissau. And there was a lot of pressure, and you know the conflict was over who is in control of the uranium in Niger, for example.
France.
And the ECOWAS, which is, I think the current chairman is from Nigeria. Nigeria was to be used as a ground to the other ECOWAS members who had also done coups. They said, if you attack Niger, we are also, you have attacked us. And you can see Niger has succeeded. It has negotiated because I think it had the backing of, it didn't come out, but I think Russia was there and China. So having a big power within a movement like this is beneficial. Let us not preempt and say we are going to lose out. We have, yes, sometimes we may not have equal share, but a balance can be struck, fairness.
However, here we are all seen as equals.
Yes. So there is no way we can have a movement where we are all equals. Okay?
Presumed to be. Under
Presumed to be. So when you see you are tapping something from somewhere, why not? The biggest problem, like he said earlier, is that structure, which is in NAM. It's a very, very, and I support him saying that we need to restructure. We need to have a secretariat. We need to have funds drawn towards one secretariat, and we run various programs wherever we are running them.
Because to chip into what Doctor has raised, you see all international bodies, say for the UN, they are named according to geographical locations. Yeah. The European Union, the African Union, ECOWAS, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the non-aligned movement needs to be redefined. The naming must be done very well. Either it should be the Southern Solidarity Organization, and that will bring them together on terms of discussing, can we have the Southern Development, the Southern Solidarity Development Bank? African Union, much with its own challenges, they have the African Development Bank. The East African community, small as it is, it has the East African Development Bank. The European Union Development Bank, we have the IMF. This huge organization, second to the UN that has 190 members, this has 120. What is the problem for them to discuss the funding issue, to have a formidable organization that can finance whatever, some of the issues that Doctor has been raising? Is it an issue of just coming and you sit around the table and you take coffee and so on and so forth? So let them have such a bank, Southern Solidarity Development Bank, where all funds collected as membership get into one basket, and they start thinking, in Uganda, we discussed about climate change. This is what we should allocate for this, you know? But you cannot come always, you talk, then you submit your documents to the UN for consideration, you know? It loses meaning. Yet you have the biggest, you have 60% of the world's population, but you cannot galvanize to discuss the funding issue.
Well, very interesting revelations here and realities, by the way, when it comes to an allied movement, which has kicked off today in Uganda at the Speak Resort, Munyonyo. And we are very optimistic that there is power in numbers and there is power in a common voice on a particular issue. We last saw the Baku, where they came up with a declaration. Of course, this morning, earlier on, the senior officials were looking at, do we review directly or we just add in issues that come out as a result of technicalities that may not have been encompassed in the initial document. Now, Doctor, still coming back to you, in the area of climate change, you are optimistic that once this issue is tabled at NAM, the Kampala summit, then there could be major breakthroughs achieved. Where do you draw your confidence from, having listened to Timothy Sibathi and his approach or perspective of viewing things?
I think any progress in anything begins with an idea. Okay? So when you are ideologically bankrupt, you cannot make progress. When ideas come up, then in NAM, and they say we focus on this is priority in our agenda, okay? I begin that marks the progress which we want. We may not, at this point in time, see that we shall achieve much, but there is a starting point. So I draw my confidence voice in an area which for quite long, voice on climatic change. It has been featuring in UN summits, it has been featuring in COP. But now, as the 120 countries which are heavily indebted the 120 countries, they are also refocusing that I think this thing we should bring it down to individual countries. The unfortunate part is that, as he said, that we are not having a secretariat which can ensure that all these issues have a budget and then we implement actions jointly. But I think there is something each individual member state can take from there. I've told you, Uganda government, I think the president is in support, that come the budget of 2024-25, there is already a policy that we should incorporate climatic financing in the budget and activities aligned towards climatic mitigation in that line. So and I believe I'm just optimistic because this has not been the case. This has not been the case before. So if this policy is implemented, why not be optimistic? Why not be confident something? Each, like the media, what you are doing here, the media has a very, very strong influence in society. It's a game changer. When now issues of climatic change begin being talked about, and UBC, in partnership with other media, they begin talking about, they can conscientize the society that we need to do something. Okay? So I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic because an idea, it begins with an idea and it is translated into actions which can bring about desirable change.
Well, now coming back to you, Timothy, when you talk about the NAM, I may not go into because I already know your perception and, of course, belief and realities when it comes to making things work out. But as a host country, what then do we stand to benefit?
Of course, the hotel industry is going to benefit because many of the adverse parties that have already arrived, they have paid for accommodation and their evening lives. So we expect that the hotel industry will get money. Uganda's night economy they will see foreign exchange, a lot of money, exchanging hands. Also the tourism industry. I'm made to understand that spouses of some of these dignitaries and even the dignitaries themselves, there are those who have already made bookings to tour some of our national parks, go there for a holiday of 1 week, 2 weeks after the summit. So the tourism sector also is going to get money. But also it's going to move Uganda's rankings, because I'm meant to understand it's the first time in the history of the non-aligned movement and the G77 plus China. It's the first time those two conferences happening at the same time in a given country like Uganda. So Uganda is hosting them. Is going to host those two summits for the first time in history. It happening, and the chair over the two organizations being handed over to one person to run.
Now, in terms of,
but in addition, you said there will be economic forums. Okay, so the business community is there, and this is an opportunity to identify where do we cooperate, where do we work together, which areas of investment opportunities are in Uganda that some of these members can go with and have a collaboration with some Ugandans. So I believe there are business investment opportunities that come along. Besides, you see, Uganda is now under pressure. Goa has gone. We are having money from World Bank is not coming. We have had sanctions. Now, when we have NAM, and China is there, and India is there, and Indonesia, these are they are advancing economies. I believe the pressure that is mounting from those who want to bulldoze us will say, oh, we need to check what we are doing. These people, we need each other. These people might go on the other side of China and start getting money, okay? So I believe that NAM makes Uganda, as the chair, a strong, formidable force, not to bulldoze around with, or when you are bulldozing, you bulldoze with caution.
Now, but for me, I think to differ a little bit, I do believe that America needs Uganda more than Uganda which needs America. How much exports, just check on statistics, how much exports, how much trade does Uganda do with the United States? How much, just look at AGOA, what were we exporting?
How much did we lose?
And how much did we lose? Just look at them. Other than it's us actually who were giving Americans business. Because some of the second-hand clothes that flood our markets here, just we buy them from the American markets and we bring them here. Uganda's strategic role in the Great Lakes region. America needs Uganda because of its role in the geopolitics of the Great Lakes region. There is not any big transaction that America has had with Uganda as far as Uganda's role in the geopolitics of this country. One, the fight against terrorism, championing also America's military interest. Uganda has been at the forefront of doing that. So this issue of AGOA is just a minor thing, which I do believe that they are featuring it in because of this issue of the anti-homosexuality bill. And I'm actually disappointed with the president, Joe Biden, because his predecessor, his good friend Barack Obama, former president, was against this. Was against these issues of gay while he was his vice president. Now, why is it that when he assumes power, he runs away from what they believed in with Barack Obama, and he starts moving sanctions? Those are the double standards that we should.
Now, even before you go to the double standards,
I think as we are a chair, you agree, the chair will have a lot of influence in influencing other member states to ensure that some of these pressures we are having are reduced to some level.
Maybe this I will put to Tibathi. Hosting the 19th Non-Allied Movement Summit, what does it mean in terms of diplomatic relations or diplomatic placing for a country like Uganda?
Of course, them coming here, because some of the principles that the non-aligned movement believe in, Uganda has walked the talk. Has walked the talk than any other member state of the non-aligned movement. I'm not talking about observer states. Than any other, and I want to quote me on this, it has acted as an ambassador of peace in the Great Lakes region. Even beyond Africa, we have had our troops in the Equatorial Guinea trying to train and ensure that the Equatorial Guinea Army gets a better capability and equipping them with military skills. We have done it in Somalia when even the United States had failed to get in there. In 1993, when the Black Hawk, you saw the incident, they ran away. It became, the country's lead into genocide. The international community was watching. Uganda went in there in 2007, stabilized what Somalia is today is because of Uganda. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have been there, and we are still there. Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has been pacified, much as a little work is still needed. We were in Burundi. Burundi had also in 2006 had become a problem. It's now stable. South Sudan, which had become a menace, it has been stabilized, in spite of a few negative elements that can be worked on. So the influx, partly of refugees in Uganda, is a testimony that Uganda has been a peaceful country, and that the stability now that is moving on. Of late, we are taking a lead role in ensuring that Sudan stabilizes. You saw the transitional leader was here. His rival was also here. We are trying to see that a peaceful deal is negotiated and that country also stabilizes. So in the role of being an ambassador of peace, Uganda has played its part. Mediating with neighboring countries on certain issues where they do not agree, it has played its role. Things are moving on well. So I think even beyond Africa, even in the on the African continent. So I think them bring here this conference. One was based on that. They think that now President Museveni must be like among the grandfathers of Africa, where you can say that let us good fathers. Let us get there and we tap into his wisdom. So I think it's the reason that they brought their summit here. Leave alone these other things.
Baku then of course the vetting and fine, looking at all other factors. But I will go back to Doctor. Very passionate about the environment, and of course very optimistic that by the end or immediately after the end of this summit, we shall have achieved much when it comes to environment conservation, adaptation, and maybe a document that clearly states how far member states should move into this. But there is one thing, Doctor, when it comes to matters of environment and these various global, regional blocs, movements, that many countries sound passionate and interested. But when it comes to walking the talk, it's where they fail. They'll talk about we must have emissions per this level. Then they'll not close their coal factories. They'll talk about we must ensure that we phase out fossil fuels. Yet when they get into bodies of oil producing companies, then they like to say, no, we can at least have this transition a little bit slower. They'll talk about carbon trade, they'll commit, but then there's nothing, having a fund put their money in, that doesn't happen. Now, it more looks like something that they are willing to do, or stage managed. You people who are advocating for these changes, is it that countries fail to understand the impact of climate change, or economies, issues of economics reign over?
First of all, I will disagree with you that they make commitments at a global level, at organizational level, and they don't bring into action. For example, on climatic change, there is a global body for mobilizing climatic finance. What individual countries are not doing is how to access those funds. They are not putting in place policies and programs that can seek those funds to come into your country and work on.
Sorry to interject. Let me just give you an example. The recent concluded COP, East Africa, Uganda, and Africa, were pushing for the damage and loss fund.
Yes.
And what they got from there to see that the countries that cause more damage still pay more to these countries in avenues of ensuring that they safeguard or look at. But actually, after the COP, most of the participants, I was speaking to the director of NEMA and many others, they will tell you that actually what we got is not the commitments, even in all this funding, the magnitude of what they are supposed to give, you eventually find that it's not what they are giving.
Sources of funding come from various organizations. European Union, for example, is one of them. That Global Climatic Fund is there. So there are various sources. If NEMA is looking at one, then I think they have a problem. They can tap into resources. But also, the tendency, before I say that, you are now agreeing that we don't have common resolutions. The developing countries are saying, you people, you are the generator of much of the emissions. And for us, we are absorbing. We are also generating because we are the consumers of their products. Therefore, we promote. So I think it's still a debate that we don't come to common position. But the point is that we need to reduce emissions. Reduction of emissions is not preventing the development of our resources, like I earlier said. If, for example, you extract oil and you'll get money, if that money could be channeled towards reforestation, restoration of wetlands, if that money, part of it, is directed towards youth, green jobs for the youth, climatic smart agriculture, I think that is a balance which we need to have. It's not about saying completely do away with fossil fuels. Then you'll conserve poverty. And yet, our goals of sustainable development, poverty is actually number one. Okay? No poverty. No, zero hunger. And so on. If you are talking of health, all these which are in. So I think you cannot, it is still a debate. You cannot say completely do away with fossil fuels. You need to have these fossil fuels so that you can also have some resources directed at restoring the environment to avert climatic change, to have climatic resilience, to have adaptation. So we cannot completely say that, yes, they make resolutions. There are efforts which are going on, even in this country, towards climatic change. But the majority of them are taken up by civil and the Paris Treaty, and we have made this commitment. Efforts are being done by civil society.
Then what And why should we even get excited?
A discussion cannot end. We can continue having discussions and conversations until we achieve. So we cannot say why is
It's the wish of every person that the issue of climate change, government handles it very carefully, to ensure that really they achieve what the whole world wants and fix the issue of environmental degradation. But while we are advocating for climate change, we must know that there is an issue of also unemployment. And how we can only fix the issue of unemployment is to have a robust industrialization which can absorb these people. So once the industrial sector is weak, the other issue will not be achieved of unemployment. And now, industrialization can be achieved at the expense of climate change. Whether you like it or not, that will happen. You can have a drive from Matugap to the other side of the world, the one that you call green belts, wetlands. There are factories there. There are built factories there. This Nama Industrial Park used to be a forest reserve. But because the urgent needed to fix the unemployment problem, you need to stake some of these, you need to sacrifice some of these forests. And that has happened and is still happening. So as you discuss climate change issues, get to know that you need to balance the equation, industrialization versus climate change. While you advocate for more funding in climate change, it's the same debate that is going on with the industrialization to fix the unemployment problem.
No, may I?
Yes.
Yes, green belts have gone. The wetlands are being occupied by factories. Then, if this has happened, should we say nothing more we can do?
We need to balance the boat.
We need to balance the boat. How do we balance the boat? I think there are minimal efforts, yes, for environmental restoration. That's why I said government must put a lot of deliberate efforts, okay? And of course, government works with everybody else, okay? If, for example, it becomes, this is media, a policy that media should do this, capture where this is happening, it is against this environmental regulation and what, and we expose these people, then that is good progress. Now, with regard to industrialization, we cannot say industrialization should not take place. But are we developing technologies in the industries which are green technologies? The issue of jobs, we are only looking at jobs from industries, from the service sector. We need to look at, there is what we call green jobs. And this is an area which we have not gone into. How do we create green jobs? How do we, they are in every, they are in energy, they are in agriculture, okay? There's something we can do where the youth can come in and do activities. For example, if you see around Kampala, there is some very good progress about collection of plastic bottles. And people are getting jobs in collection, in recycling. The problem is Kavera, the one which is. So that is one way. How do we become adapted to agriculture so that we do agriculture even when we are on small plots, small land? So there is a lot we can do. You have heard about people who have turned into volcanic rocks into energy, okay? People are making fuel-saving stoves. People are doing biogas technologies. So if we can commit funding, some funding in that direction, we can create even more jobs, green jobs for the youth, okay? So I think when the worst has come, we are now terrified by how industries have occupied wetlands, but it can't be business as usual.
Well, these are some of the discussions that are going to be shaping the 19th Non-Allied Movement Summit that is happening at the Speak Resort, Munyonyo. Earlier on today morning, on the first day, we had the arrival of delegates at the senior officials meeting venue, that's the Speak Resort, Munyonyo. Then we had a plenary session for the opening of the senior officers meeting that was still at that very venue, and the address by the head of delegation of the Republic of Azerbaijan and the chair of the NAM. Then we had welcoming address by Minister for Foreign Affairs, General J.J. Abaka Odong, and of course we had adaptation of the agenda that was to be followed. Then we had a report by the chairman of that is the NAM coordinating bureau, then election of the chairman of the senior officers meeting, where the name opposed that is proposed by Uganda did not get any opposition there, and of course Ambassador Adonia Yebare qualified there and is currently doing that. Then election of the chair, we had establishment of the political committee and the economic and social committee. Now, by the time we broke off a live broadcast giving you what was happening at Munyonyo, these committees were sitting. But as, of course, looking at images on your screen is the Entebbe International Airport, where we now have the VVIP section and the VIP section. And of course, this is where we're expecting all our delegates, as they will be coming in, will be giving you who has arrived at what particular time, more so in time for, of course, other heads of states when they will be jetting in. But we shall also later be talking to Ivan Kahawa, still regarding updates of what is happening at the airport, but also around the city. Earlier on, we were having some footage there of how traffic is happening and all that. Well, I'll be taking final remarks from each of you, and allow me to begin with Timothy Sebathi when we talk about the non-allied movement and, of course, your expectations and what Ugandans should also expect.
My expectations are very clear. That this time round, let the Kampala summit walk the talk. Because we want to know what did they agree on in the Baku summit. That we want to know. And now what is at stake? And the other issue that I raised, structural reforms of the non-allied movement, if it's going to make meaning and it's going to be relevant to many of the issues that they keep talking about, because some of the issues that they keep on talking about are no longer applicable in the current world order. Things have changed from what they used to think in the 60s, because now you can no longer talk about imperialism, you can no longer talk about colonialism. That has changed. That should not be even a topic of discussion. You should be now discussing issues of how can they survive in the current wave of neocolonialism? How can they enforce national self-determination? How can they address issues of human trafficking, issues of state and non-state terrorism, issues to do with food crisis, issues to do with climate change, like what doctors raise, and many other issues, issues to do with the nuclear. Those are some of the issues that they should be discussing about. The war in the Ukraine and Russia, much as I know that's not part of the topic, but they want to discuss the Israel-Palestine war in the Gaza. But we know what.
Well, in the interest of time, I have to get to Ivan. Doctor, your parting shot.
This being the biggest summit in Uganda, there are a lot of lessons we can draw. Some of the things have been coming from continental organizations and world bodies, but now it is with us. And a lot, and as a person who is interested in climatic adaptation, climatic resilience, I see that Uganda is going to begin adopting some of these resolutions, and we incorporate them into our policy, into resource allocation, and we shall have a lot of programs geared towards climatic resilience, climatic adaptation, and mitigation.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Dr. Peter, who happens to be a lecturer at Nkumba University, specialist on environmental governance. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, our very own Timothy Sibathi, thank you also for being part of this special broadcast as we try to dig into the Non-Allied Movement Summit happening at Speak Resort Munyonyo. And of course, what we should be expecting, and of course, also look at what we stand to benefit as a host country. We'll be having Ivan Kahwa in a minute from now, and of course he'll be giving us what is happening from his area where he has been stationed. Just an update on the Non-Allied Movement. Remember, there are about a number of areas. We have the international airport where visitors will be coming in, both the VVIPs and the VIPs, and then we have Speak Resort Munyonyo, where we shall be having a main activity happening also there. But of course, we'll be also be having an update in that area.